Hi ICA, good morning. If you're new to church today, we just want to give you a warm welcome and we're so glad that you join us for a special service, the Next Gen Sunday. Yup, that's right. But before we start into service, here's a couple of announcements for this coming week.
Hi, my name is Gwen. Welcome to ICA NextGen Sunday service. ICA Kids has prepared children's church materials for kids like me. You can download them at bit.ly/ICA Kids Online or scan the QR code on the screen. Follow ICA Kids on Instagram for more updates. Giving in ICA has been made easy. You can scan the QR code to give or visit icasby.com/giving for more options. If you need prayer, we want to connect with you. Visit bit.ly/ICA Prayer Online and let us know how we can pray for you. Don't forget we have prayer service every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. You can check our Instagram to get the Zoom ID. Stay connected with us through social media on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Spotify to get more updates on what's going on in the church. You can also join us on icasby.online.church every week for a better online church experience.
Thank you.
Yo, hold on everybody, there's some more announcement that you all need to hear. The first one, ICA Youth is going to have our very first online camp experience. Yes, very first ever. And you don't want to miss it. It'll be on the 1st to the 3rd of October. So yes, student, please get your parents to register you, and parents, all right? Register them because you need a break and we think you deserve the break. So sign them up to assemble. It'll be amazing. You can contact this contact details here and it'll be the best 3 days of your quarantine life. Okay? The next announcement is that next week, ICA is going to be starting our new sermon series, The Chosen, based on the TV series that we'll be watching together as a church. You should definitely join. Come with us as we go and watch the stories of Jesus together with our brother and sister. Last but not least, next week we are going to have our communion. So get your elements ready so you can come and join us as we do our communion together.
Thank you, kids. Now let's worship together.
Good morning, church. I hope you're doing well. Let's praise Him today. I was lost with a broken heart. You picked me up, now I'm set apart. From the ash I am born again. Forever safe in my Savior's hand. You were more than words could say. I'll follow you over all my days. I'll fix my
Let's join our voices together. Let's lift the name of Jesus from wherever we are. Let's go!
Kamu yang telah ubah hidupku, kau jadikan aku ciptaan baru. Ku angkat tanganku dan memujimu. Hidupku tak sama sejak kau ada, dan kini engkaulah pusat segalanya. Kasihmu kan selalu cukup bagiku. Keagunganmu, kedahsyatanmu terpancar dari indahnya dunia. Segala yang ada telah kau ciptakan, karyamu sungguh tiada tandanya. Sungguh tiada tandanya. Mulia namamu, mulia namamu. Hidupku tak sama sejak kau ada, dan kini engkaulah pusat segalanya. Kasihmu kan selalu cukup bagiku. Keagunganmu, kedahsyatanmu terpancar dari indahnya dunia. Segala yang ada telah kau ciptakan, karyamu sungguh tiada tandanya. Sungguh tiada tandanya. Mulia namamu, mulia namamu. To God be the glory for the things He's done. To God be the glory for the things He's done. To God be the glory for the things He's done. To God be the glory for the things He's done. Keagunganmu, kedahsyatanmu terpancar dari indahnya dunia. Kami nyatakan Yesus mulia. Segala yang ada Kau telah ciptakan, karyamu sungguh tiada tandanya. Kami nyatakan Yesus mulia. Mulia namamu, mulia namamu, mulia namamu, mulia namamu, mulia namamu.
Lord, we come to you this morning. We just want to worship you, Lord. We're gonna sing of your love for us. That your love for us is never complicated, Lord. That you love us for who we are. Won't you touch our heart this morning, Lord? There's a simplicity, humility to the way you love me, honesty, purity. God, you make it easy. Special words, formulas could ever win you over. For your love isn't easy. Even when I can't see clearly, somehow you still make it easy. Your love's uncomplicated. You love me just
Father, we just want to say thank you, Lord Jesus, for the time and opportunity, Lord, that we can come together this Sunday morning, Lord Jesus, to be with our brother and sister, Lord Jesus, to worship the name that is higher above all names, God, as we celebrate what you have done in our next generations, Father. We just want to say thank you, Lord Jesus, for your protection, for your guidance, Lord Jesus, towards this church and the next generation within this church, Father. And we cannot wait for what is in store for them in their lives, Father. And today, Lord, we just want to celebrate that. And as we prepare our heart, Lord Jesus, to go and continue on to listen to your word, Lord, we just want to invite your Holy Spirit to come, Father, and speak to us this morning, Lord. And we just want to say thank you, God. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen, 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 amen. What's up, ICA? I hope you guys have been enjoying our Next Gen Sunday Takeover so far. And I would like to thank the team for putting it all together. You know, you guys worked so hard at it. And you guys, you know what? You guys are the real MVP. So hearts to you. But worry not, because we're not done yet. After this, we are going to have our beloved East Campus pastor, Pastor Ardo and Sarah, to come and share the word. But before that, for you parents, we have something special for you. So check this out.
Hi ICA! I'm Lloyd Tansawitnyo and I'm Loket Tansawitnyo. We are both 10 years old.
My name is Skylar. I am 6 years old.
My name is Jeremy. I'm 16.
My name is Amy, and I'm currently 18 years old.
Hi, my name is Olive. I'm 21 years old.
Hi, my name is Misha, but you can call me Fei. I'm 22.
This question is a little hard for me to answer.
One word? That's so tricky.
If I had to pick one word in particular, it will be optimistic, I guess.
I think it's educating because they always help us. They teach us which one is right and wrong, and they also scold us if we do something wrong. It's definitely loving. They always love us no matter what. Aren't we glad we have to miss our parents? Yeah, we're so glad we have to miss our parents.
One word to describe my parents will be affectionate.
One word that I would use to describe my parents would be imperfect. Imperfect.
There are just so many words to describe my parents, but I think the best word to describe them would be loving.
Sleep.
I'd like to thank them for not giving up. Now it's a hard time for everybody, but I'm grateful that they can keep on fighting for us and just keep on moving.
I would like to thank my parents for taking care of me wholeheartedly. And even though I failed them a lot of times, they still love me as I am. They're the best parents I could ever ask for, even though that they're not perfect, but I realize that I'm imperfect as well.
They allow me to play badminton. They allow me to watch Olympics. They allow me to play games.
So I wanted to thank my parents. I wanted to thank parents everywhere, actually. Thank you for the sacrifices that you've made for us. 爸妈，谢谢。
I just wanted to thank my parents for giving me all the support and love and kindness that I needed, even during the times where I wasn't so easy to get along with, or where I wasn't so easy to love. And I know parenting can be pretty hard, especially when I have 4 other siblings. So thank you, parents, for everything. And I just couldn't ask for a better parent than you guys. So thank you. Love you.
And thank you, Mommy and Daddy, for being such loving and helpful parents. And thank you, Jesus, for giving us such amazing parents. And thank you, ICA, for giving us this time to share. Stay safe and healthy. God bless you. Bye. Bye-bye.
Welcome, everybody, to ICA Online Service collaboration with IC Medan. My name is Ardo. I'm one of the pastors here in ICA, and next to me is my beautiful wife, Sarah. We just want to welcome you to Next Gen Sunday collaboration with ICA Kids, ICA Youth, and ICA Young Adults. Once again, we just want to encourage you to follow them everywhere, specifically on Instagram at ICA Kids, at ICA Youth SBY, and at ICA Young Adults. We encourage you to download the Church Center app as well for everything ICA. And again, we want to say welcome and hi again to our friends in IC Medan. We just want to say we love you guys. Yes. Thank you for this collaboration that we get the chance to do together, and our prayers.
Absolutely.
for you guys as well, and specifically for the
Carrie.
Duncans. We
Yes.
miss them so much, and we can't wait for them to come back to Egypt. And when they do, we'll do the things that we need to do as a church. So here we are right now, Next Gen Sunday. We're going to talk about, what does it mean for us as a church to think about the next generation. And so it's such a great honor. Thank you, Pastor Fish, aka Kevin Chambas, for giving us the privilege, the honor to share today.
Absolutely.
But this is the season that we're in right now, right?
Parenthood.
Parenthood. Ruby and AJ.
Yep, we've got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old at home.
Yeah.
So our whole world is filled with PJ Masks, Paw Patrol, surprise eggs.
I mean,
Mini Force.
What else am I missing? There's a lot of them. A lot of Disney Plus.
Yeah, all of the kid shows you can imagine.
Yeah. That's all we're about to sing, but we should save them.
We're not going to sing the
we're not going to
song.
sing. We don't want to. We totally memorize the song, but we're not singing for you guys. But that's where we're at right now. And so if you could relate with us, you could write something on the chat or in the comments and just say like, yep, that's us too.
Yes.
Just this whole crazy pandemic, right? We're working from home, another lockdown.
Yep.
In Surabaya, and just all the craziness of being at home.
And we also want to just encourage all parents. So you may have teenagers at home, you may have young adults at home.
Adults, maybe.
So we just hope that the message we have today will be an encouragement to you wherever you are. If you are a single person, this message can also be an encouragement to you, especially if one day you want to have a family. And even if you don't, it's an encouragement to you to practice these things with your family.
Right.
Yeah.
And the idea that it does, take the whole village, right? Like as the saying goes, right, to raise a child. And so it needs all of us together, not just pastors, not just youth leaders or kids leaders or young adult leaders.
Yes.
But it takes all of us collectively to understand that God has a plan for our next generation.
Yes. Amen.
And we need his help. We need his word. We need his spirit.
Yes.
For us to just see the next generation rise up to love Jesus even more fiercely than we could ever love him.
Agreed.
But the reality is that families are under attack.
Yeah, the family unit is under attack in this generation, especially with this pandemic right now.
Sad.
And so, just reading a couple stats. Divorce rates around the world have increased in some areas. We read numbers as high as 122% increasing as of last year. Children also heavily affected by the pandemic. Suicide rates rising. One source I read said suicides are the second leading cause of death in the U.S. Mental health related visits for children aged 5 to 17 have increased by 30% in 2020.
That's crazy.
And so we just want to acknowledge that this is an issue and that we need to really encourage families and parents to really pay attention to mental health. And we want to encourage.
And I think it's so timely that the next gen want to just take this opportunity to address all of the stress, the problems, the issues that we have at home.
Yes.
And the data has shown that. And just because we're in Indonesia does not mean that there are actual mental health issues that are happening at home. And so we may not address each mental health issue that comes from Zoom fatigue, or we're locked down, or we can't go on our vacation, or our graduation is on a Zoom, or or our schooling now is in Zoom. Like when it's Daddy's turn to take Ruby to school, we just simply go out of the bathroom and straight to the classroom, which is right in front of a screen. And just the joys of standing next to my daughter and trying to figure out all these arts and crafts that dads would never have done before.
Or realizing you were not muted the whole time. That's a super fun one.
If you can relate, you could just LOL right now in the chats and comments and just say amen, brother. Okay, and so we just want to encourage you, once again, parents, specifically, right? In this season, and just to raise your awareness.
Yes, absolutely.
And we're just trying to figure out. We've been praying, like, how do we speak to this situation? And the more we talk about it, the more we realize, like, we need just as much help as
As
anyone
everyone
else that's gonna watch
Yeah,
this.
that's right. That's right.
And so we just thought maybe we need to go back to the Bible. That's a great start.
Mhm.
So before we read this passage, I'm
Yeah.
gonna have you read it, babe. Let's just pray first,
Yeah.
and just dedicate this service
Amen.
and the reading of God's word. This is
Amen.
it's one of the few passages that we'll read over,
Yeah.
but it's so crucial. So let's just ask God to just lead this time of reading of God's word.
Yeah.
And what does it mean for us practically? Let's
Yeah,
pray.
let's
Father,
pray.
we just give thanks to you for this time that all of us are watching this program on online service, whether it be in the morning, afternoon, or late evening,
Lord.
whenever and wherever. We just ask you, Holy Spirit, to take control, take over this time of reading of your word. And what does it mean for us practically that as you inspire us to speak and spark conversations at home and maybe even spark off other ideas that even Sarah and I have not even thought of. And it's not about what we can say or what we don't say and how we could say things better, but it's really about what you're about to do in our homes, in our communities, in our schools, and in our cities. And so we just commit to the reading of your word and also what it means for us as a family to how to live this out in our everyday walk, no matter in a lockdown, in another PPKM, in another issues that we're dealing with mentally, spiritually, financially, all the things we're facing at home, we know that we could rely on you and your word and your promises. So thank you. It is in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
Amen. So let's go ahead and start.
Let's read.
With the Shema from Deuteronomy chapter 6. Listen, chapter 6, verses 4 to 6. Listen, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. And you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. And you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I am giving you today.
I just want to take a few seconds to talk about how much I love this passage. I've told you many times when The Chosen season 1, if you haven't seen Chosen season 1, we had a whole series here at ICA. And straight up my favorite moment of the whole series of season 1, that season, was when Jesus in the story was asking the children to recite the Shema. Now, if you don't know what Shema is, Shema means listen. And that's why in the beginning of the Shema, it says, listen, O Israel. In the Hebrew, it's literally Shema Ye Israel, which means to listen, O Israel. And oh man, that's a whole other sermon I could just spend time on. That to listen in the Hebrew understanding is to do. So if you don't do, you have not listened. And oh man, I could go everywhere with that. But I just love how this is the essence of at least the Judeo faith, and in which we as Christians have the Old Testament also as the foundations of everything that we understand the scriptures into the New Testament and the stories of Jesus and the early church. This is one of its biggest pillars, the Shema, to know, to love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, and strength. But it's not only that. And I think just for Next Gen Sunday, what's so special is if you just head over to a couple more verses afterwards, this is where it gets really awesome. It turns out that this Shema standalone sermon is about us to love God with all our heart, soul, and strength. Turns out it's not just
just that.
There are a couple of verses next to it that actually is the reason why we want to talk to you
today. It gives
today.
us the action.
Right?
And how to love God.
Right.
Yeah, with your all. So in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 7 to 9, it says, repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you are at home and when you are on the road, when you are going to bed and when you are getting up. Tie them to your hands, wear them on your foreheads as reminders. Write them on the doorposts of your houses and your gates.
Yeah, that's so what turns out to be supposed to be a personal thing between you and the Lord, right? The Shema, to listen to Him and to obey His word, to love Him with heart, soul, and strength. Turns out that the next thing to do is not just vertical, and I think you talked about this before, in our study of this word. It's not just a vertical thing, but it ends up horizontal.
Absolutely.
How can you say that I have this vertical relationship with God, and it does not affect your horizontal relationships?
Absolutely.
And so it begins with our children.
Yes.
It begins with our children. And what must we do to our children? Repeat them over and over
The
again.
truths of God and the values of God.
Right. And this leads us to we have some practical things that we just want to talk about as quickly as we can.
Yep.
This is the basis of it. And we feel that in this, especially this COVID season, hopefully, hopefully, because we're working on it a lot.
Absolutely.
We're still learning about it. But as we look back to our own experience as parents,
Yes.
we feel like these things, these 4 things really help on what we can become and do better
Yes.
in this pandemic season. So
Absolutely.
let's just begin.
So the first one is really simple. It was in the Shema.
Yeah.
Love God.
Surprise, right? Shocking.
This is a command. It's interesting. Ardo and I were talking about how a lot of times we will hear different commands from the Bible over and over again.
Right, like-
do not judge others, honor your father and mother. But one of the commands we should be hearing a lot more. And we should be repeating ourselves is love God.
Just
love God. And it is a decision and a choice.
Right.
And so for those of you listening, we would love to ask you, have you made that decision to love God? Have you made that choice to love God? Because we all know that love is not an emotion. Especially those of you who have been married a long time, love is not an emotion. A marriage is not gonna be long term if you just base it on an emotion. Absolutely not. It is a decision. It's a choice. And most of all, it's an action. So resolve in your heart and mind to love the Lord first. Right. Because like Ardo mentioned, when you love the Lord and your vertical relationship with God is healthy and strong, your other relationships, your horizontal ones, will be strong.
Wow.
And so,
wow.
We just want to mention a quote that we heard that says the best thing you can do for your kids is to love your spouse. Your spouse is that neighbor God was talking about. Love God and love your neighbor. Your closest neighbor is your spouse. And so it's just a good reminder to us, you love God, you love your spouse next.
I mean, albeit an annoying neighbor.
Yeah, sometimes our spouses are maybe the most annoying neighbors, right?
But it's true though. And that's why it's so funny, the first practical thing about repeating to our children over and over again, to the young people, the young generation, the next generation, has nothing to do with them.
Yes.
It has everything to do with us, ourselves, with the Lord.
Yes.
And if you're married, it's not just the Lord, but it's also our spouses.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We forget that we are loving our children when we love our spouse well. We have a confession to make. I mean, just being stuck indoors constantly has gotten to us. We both love to be out. We love to be with our friends. We love to just be hanging out with people. And then for all of that to be taken away and to be stuck together in the house 24/7, just it grates on our nerves. And so, we've been fighting a lot more than usual. To the point where now, whenever Ardo and I are just talking, AJ thinks that we're fighting. So he'll come between us and he'll go, stop fighting. Stop. Hug. So he'll make us hug and then he'll make us hold hands. And it's so cute, the expression on his face whenever we're hugging. He'll just be like,
I know.
But we love that because every single time he does that, he's gently reminding us that, hey, mom and dad, if you love each other well, you are loving us.
Oh.
And so I just, we wanted to add that today, that, in loving God, we love our spouse well in order to love our children well.
Absolutely. It can't be overstated.
Yeah.
And so it's so when it gets down practically to loving your spouse, it's the little things, right? And every time we do counseling, we always talk about the little things end up to be a lot of things, which end up to be a big thing.
Yes.
Because then you neglect to say thank you, you don't say you're welcome, or you say sorry, or accept your apology.
Yes.
And so, I mean, I don't want to list all the practical things to love your spouse, right? It's spending time together. It's making the time.
Yes.
It's finding that leisure activity we talk about all the time during counseling.
Which is super important because, now that we're working from home, the work never ends. We're always working. And so I think we need to start drawing that line again. Hey, this is work time and this is family time. It's super important to have that fun time with your family. to continue to build your relationship. Yeah.
Well, there are times when I want to watch that episode on my own, but I know
Yeah.
that Sarah also loves it. So it's not a big deal, but it is because it just came out on Disney Plus. I want to check it out, but I want to wait till that evening so that we can watch it together. It's just the little things to show that, okay, I'm going to put God first, and I'm going to manifest that by loving my spouse first.
Yes.
And so then when it comes to our children, let's get to our next practical thing. It all makes sense.
Yeah.
And so
when you love God first
thing,
and you love your spouse,
repeat that.
You can lead your children in a loving way. You can discipline your children in a loving way. You can teach them in a loving way. It's like Ardo said, that love that you have from the Lord and for your spouse, it trickles down. Into everything else that you do. And so you will start acting and behaving in a loving way when you choose to love God first.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So now we get to the next thing, which is, how do we repeat, over and over again to our kids? So after you kind of establish that, and we're not perfect, but we want to encourage you to love God and love your spouse. But after that, now it gets to like a real, back and forth with our own children, and that is to begin to listen.
Yeah. This is really important, especially during this pandemic. I think a lot of people are struggling internally. We talked about, struggling with mental health and just maybe negative thoughts and depression. And we cannot know this if we don't listen. And so, a good reminder for us is most people do not want to listen to understand. They want to listen to respond or to reply. And so this is a gentle reminder to all of us. Let's listen to our spouses. Let's listen to our children to understand, to let them know that we care. Let's practice empathy with them, which is the ability to understand and share feelings of another. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crucial. It's especially like we talked about how children, want to be affirmed, and the older they get, that's why I'm a bit excited, but also fearful as Ruby and AJ grows older. I sincerely and genuinely want to hear their thoughts. I really want to know what their opinions are about this issue, about life in general, about their passions and dreams.
Right.
I just want to listen to them because God has formed them exactly as they are, with all the imperfections of mommy and daddy. And here they are as they grow up to see the world, to recognize the world around them, that they have feelings. Shocking. They have opinions. They have thoughts.
Yeah, but we also want to add whatever age your children are at, listen to them. You know, like our children, they love to talk about PJ Masks now or Paw Patrol. And these are their different shows that they're watching now. And we will sit and listen. And maybe some of it doesn't even make sense, but we want to foster that environment that, hey, we are listening to you. We hear you. Are you excited about that? Wow, I want to be excited with you. Wow, I want to understand what exactly happened. Did that trouble you? Okay, let me sit in that with you. Let's think about it together. And so once you foster that environment of truly listening, I think children will want to share more. Like you won't even have to ask anymore. They will be free to share. Oh no! I just want to say I love hearing stories from other church members who've done this before us, and we've been asking a lot of help on parenting ourselves. And I notice those parents who make that conducive environment to be heard. That no matter how young, no matter how weird, no matter how anything, that you have. That you are being, what's the word? Like acknowledged, and you're being affirmed, and that you're entitled to those opinions and feelings. They may or may not be correct in the beginning on the offset, but it's important that again to make that kind of environment, that house, that culture, that I want to be heard. You can be heard. And the next step is also to be vulnerable ourselves. I don't know if it's in our notes, but that means parents. Can I speak for parents for a little bit? You can't make that kind of environment unless you yourself participate in it. That you do not. That you need to express how you feel about COVID. Like, how do you really feel about it? Do your children know? Do they know how mommy and daddy feels about this? Now, not just hear what they say or complain about their WhatsApp message or how you throw that phone across the room. That's not expressing how you feel. That's just being frustrated. But do they know how you process this COVID season? Do they know how their dad or how their mom is going through this? And it's gonna be such a huge
deal
Right.
if the children could feel like, oh my goodness,
Yes.
that's how I feel.
Yes.
Dad, that's how I feel. I didn't
Yes.
know you felt that way.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that, you feel fearful too.
Yes.
You feel uncertain as well, and that
Right.
you're scared as well. And,
Yes.
and that just builds and builds as a family together.
Yes.
Because now they know that I can be part of this safe place in my
Yes.
house. I won't be judged
Right.
about it.
Yes.
I may not be right, but
Yep.
at least I'm loved and accepted and honored for who I am, for who I am now. That's the
Yes.
power of listening,
Yes.
I believe. True
Absolutely.
listening at home.
Absolutely.
Do you want to share about Jason Reed a little bit about
Also, especially if you have older kids or teenagers, really choose the right time to listen and talk with them.
Yeah.
Jason Reed is a father whose son committed suicide, and he said this skill of listening is something he wished he practiced more with his son. And he said, you have to choose the right time to talk with your children.
Right.
You can't just burst into the room and say, all right, sit down. I know there's something wrong. Let's talk. Because they most likely will respond to you with, I'm fine.
I'm good.
But that's not the response you want, right? You want them to feel safe and free to share with you their struggles. And so he said, really choose the right time. If, for example, you're in the middle of something and your teen knocks on the door and says, hey, Mom, Dad, can we talk? Really make time for them. Just let them know if you're in the middle of a meeting and you can't talk now, hey, listen, you're important to me. I'm going to make time. Can you wait 5 minutes? Right as I finish this, we're going to talk.
Yeah.
So it takes wisdom too to know the right time.
It's not easy.
Yeah, it's not easy.
It's going to be inconvenient. I think.
Yes.
Jason Reed, you could look him up on Google, but he's someone that made a video that talked about how he dealt with his own son who committed suicide.
Yes.
And when he talked in that video, he talked about how inconvenient it is.
Right.
In order to listen, it will be inconvenient. So do not feel like it's going to be easy. Do not ever feel like it's not going to take extra steps.
Right.
Or you have to get out of your way.
Yeah.
You will need to get out, of your own way and your own schedule to listen, to truly listen.
Yeah, but it's so vital, he said, because his son always seemed happy. There didn't seem to be, what I mean? Like he didn't have depression or these, but he just wished if he had listened more, he might have seen red flags to help him, help his son. And so we do want to encourage you, if you do have a teen or a child who is struggling with mental health issues, please contact with one of the pastors here at ICA. We also have our counselors.
family@icsby.com.
Yes,
That's family@icsby.com.
Yes, we are here to support you, and we want to help.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So those are just a couple of things now. We're halfway.
Yep.
About how to repeat them over and over to our children, right? So that the practical question is, so how do I repeat them? How do I, begin to explain and live a life like that? And so the third thing is to
respond. Respond to God's invitation to spend time with you and to get into his word. We have to make room for him. All of us parents I know, wherever you are, parents, young adult, teen, we're all busy, but making room for God is vital. And so we need to make daily devotions a priority. Today, we have so many opportunities to read God's word. I mean, you can look up the verse of the day on Bible app. You can do a Devo, that's on Bible app. You can maybe, read the Bible in a year. I mean, it's up to you. But it's getting God's word into you that is the most important. One time during prayer night, I think it was Janita's mom who was praying actually.
Okay.
In her prayer, she said, Lord, when life squeezes us, may Jesus come out. And that stuck out to me so much. I thought, wow, isn't that so true? That life squeezes us. Life squeezes the life and energy out of us. What's coming out of us? Worry, stress, anger, hate, bitterness? Or is Christ coming out? Well, Christ cannot come out if he is not first in you.
Right.
Christ said, abide in me and in my word. And so we do that by making room for him and reading from his word. And so I just want to read a couple lyrics from my new favorite song by Community
It's on
Music.
repeat.
It's
For like
the title is Make Room.
7 days straight.
When you make room for God, this is what happens. Here is where I lay it down, every burden, every crown. This is my surrender. Every lie and every doubt I lay down. This is my surrender. I will make room for you to do whatever you want to. I will make room for you. And then the bridge goes on to say, shake up the ground of all my tradition, break down the walls of all my religion. Your way is better. It's that time for God to refresh you, to energize you, to give you the wisdom that you need to parent your children, the wisdom that you need in that problem you're facing at work, the wisdom that you need in the doubts and fears that you're facing. You receive all of that when you respond to God's invitation to spend time with him, to get into his word. It's so, so important. And if you respond to God's word well, you will respond to your spouse well. You will respond to your children well. You will respond to the challenges in your life well. So responding is so, so important. And in order to do that, we need to make room for God.
Right. And so then the more we do that, the more we respond well to God, the more we recognize the difference between responding and reacting to life, right?
Yes.
There's an equation in physics that says that for every action equals an opposite reaction.
Yes.
And I believe someone who repeats God's word over and over again disagrees with that.
Yes.
Just because you've been hit by something in life doesn't mean that you have to hit back by in anger and frustration and bitterness. No, you can abide in him. You can just surrender to him. And so when we begin to respond well, that's how we show to our children, oh wow, what happened to my dad?
Yes.
Like I know it's, it stinks that his business got hit and that he had a fight with mom and something happened, or with my mom with her work, or maybe in her relationships outside, and yet I see them as they respond to life this way.
Yes.
See, that is how we show a Shema life, by responding well to life.
Yes.
And just like what Sarah said, it begins with him. It begins with abiding in him. It begins with his word, his promises, his love. You know this. And so when you begin to respond to him well, life is a series of responses that you are doing according to his truth, according to his will.
Yes.
And so, man, it's a whole other sermon. You could spend a whole sermon on this, but
and to never forget that our children are watching us. Our teenagers are watching us.
Right.
How does dad respond to mom? How is mom responding to this problem right now at work? How did dad respond to my brother or sister? And they will do what you do.
Right. How did they respond to my failures?
Yes.
How did they respond when I failed in my test?
Yes.
How did they respond when, just anything?
Yeah.
And
So
they watch and they know.
For example, the other day when we were in the car, I don't know, we might have been driving to Indomaret or something like that.
Okay.
And a motorcyclist, I think, cut Ardo off or something like that. And I said, he's so naughty. And then Ruby kept on saying, naughty, naughty. He's so naughty, Mom. He's so naughty, So just remember that the way that you respond, the way that you say things will be mimicked by your children and by your teens.
That's why we can't wait to read that poem before we close.
Yeah.
But before we do that, there's one more last thing that we want to say, that how to repeat them. And it may seem kind of a cop out that we use the same word to explain it. But the last thing we need to do to repeat is to actually repeat them. Okay. So it's not just repeat, but it's in
to
other words,
over-communicate God's values and word in your home.
To keep on doing it.
Yes.
To, it's not just Sunday.
Yes.
It's not just Friday nights at FNL.
Right.
It's not just when you drop off your students to a Zoom on FNL, not drop off your kids at Zoom Hangouts every Sunday. It's not just the young adults on Thursdays.
Right.
But it's got to be much more than that. Now, it's a whole other sermon to say the responsibility is that needs to be born or bear are the parents, right? That the parents have the responsibility to raise up their own children, but it's not just Ardo and Sarah. We need the community.
Yes.
We need ICA kids. We need ICA youth. We need ICA young adults. So it's just this partnering of walking side by side with each other with our next generation in order for us to repeat them, to keep on reminding of God's word, to keep on putting them. So can our children see that when they join ICA Kids, are they hearing about God's truth?
Yeah.
And when they turn off Zoom, what is being talked about with mom and dad?
Yeah. So talk about what they're learning in Sunday school.
Right.
Ask them about what the sermon was about
What
for
was Pastor
ICA
Fisher's
youth
sermon last
Friday night.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's how we repeat it over and over again.
Yeah.
We over communicate. We keep on doing it.
Yes.
And let's read Proverbs 22 real quick.
Yep.
Verse 6. Do you wanna read
Direct
it?
your children onto the right path, and when they are older, they will not leave it.
Oh, this is this is why we want to take our time very quickly, as quick as we can.
Yep, as quick as we can.
To say thank you to every next gen volunteers. We're looking at you right now.
Thank you so
looking
much.
There's a lens here, but I'm looking at you guys. We're so proud of you.
Yes.
We are just letting you know that you are making it possible for young kids, for teenagers, for young adults to be able to walk side by side with you and to know that walking with Jesus is as practical as being with you.
Yes.
And so thank you for your sacrifices. Thank you for your just the endless hours of preparing these for the next generation. I want to say thank you to Bella. I want to say thank you to Maya, Peter, Carlina, Steffi, Deborah, Caitlin, Gomez, Karen, Jessica, Erlyn, Rosa, Siska, Weiwei, Reynard, Owen, Denise, William, thank you, Keitaro, Amy, Joy, Kelly, Anas, Flo, Jovan, Elsie, Inika, Maria, Misha, and Chacha as well. That's everyone we could mention for ICA Kids.
Thank you. ICA Kids volunteers. Every Sunday, they hang out with our kids from 11 to 12, and they talk about God's word. So you are helping support us parents in repeating God's words and values to our children. Thank you so much. We also want to give a shout out to our volunteers for ICA Youth.
ICA Youth. Follow them, ICA Youth SBY. Don't forget to join Assemble Online Camp. That's on October 1st till the 3rd. Registration ends on September 12th, so it's not too late if you haven't signed up yet. But we want to give a shout out to Pastor Fish, who's here in the building. We see him among the lights here. There he is. Lavina, Valerie, Mayor, Ellen, Candy, Benny, Trista, Joey, Dave, Nikki, Singi, Victor, Hadianto, How, Richard, Samuel, Danieka, Shania, Nadine, Alicia, Mulianto, Gabby, Amadeo, Jerome, thank you, Owen Henderson, thank you, Deborah, Felicia, Dalvin, Dan Zhao, Safira, Alice, Jofe, Epin, aka Josephine, Giselle L, Matthew, Nicole Theon, Evelyn, Wiki, Giselle A, Julio, Tessa, just to name a few. Thank you guys
so much for investing
every Friday
in our youth.
Yeah.
We also want to say thank you to our young adults volunteers. You can follow them at ICA Young Adults on Instagram. We want to say thank you to Anita, Karen, Catherine, Clarissa or Chacha, Eling and Janita, or Jessica, Selvi, Victor, Yenny, and Johannes. Thank you so much for investing in our young adults here at ICA.
Absolutely.
We just want to quickly remind you that if you have teenagers, please encourage them to join FNL or ICA Youth on Fridays.
On Fridays. Every Friday.
On Thursdays, if you have a young adult at home, we meet, young adults meet on Thursdays. Yeah.
So again, in the end, it is our responsibility together, your responsibility as parents. It's not just the church, but we need each other to walk hand by hand to do that. So we're going to end with just a really great poem that you found. Sarah, it's an anonymous poem, but it's really good.
Yeah, and so let me just finish with the poem to kind of close. A careful mom or dad I ought to be, a little fellow follows me. I do not dare to go astray, for fear he'll go the self-same way. Not once can I escape his eyes. Whatever he sees me do, he tries. Like me, he says he's going to be that little chap who follows me. I must remember as I go through summer sun and winter snow, I'm molding for the years to be that little chap who follows me. What an honor it is for us to be parents, for us to be able to raise little ones to become followers of Christ who will continue to bless others. And we can do this by repeating God's words to them and to remind them to love God first and foremost.
Absolutely. All right, so with that, let's pray.
Yep, let's pray.
We're gonna close and just, thank you so much for joining. But this is NextGen Sunday, so we're gonna pray for you. Let's pray. Father, we thank you so much just for our time here.
Yes, Lord.
To spend time in your word and just to look at the Shema and Deuteronomy and just to, may we listen, God. May we listen, may we obey, may we take action, may we respond, may we love you with all of our heart, soul, and strength, and may we repeat these truths to the next generation.
Yes, God.
Starting from our little ones, not so little ones, and our teenagers, and definitely young adults who are up and coming in their lives and, and making decisions. They're altering society as we know it. Lord, we just want to embrace them. We want to pray over them. And we ask you for your mercy. We ask you for your spirit. We ask you for conviction in their lives and in their hearts. And as they continue to look to you, to love you first and foremost, that they become the people that you want them to be, to love you, to love others, to grow in their faith, and to make disciples wherever you send them to go. And I want to pray specifically also, God, for parents who are dealing with the minutia, the details of everyday life in this COVID lockdown season that is never easy. But we thank you that by your Spirit alone, that they're able to withstand, they're able to find wisdom, strength, inner peace that comes only from you, so that they become successful parents, not because they're perfect, but because they surrender it all to you. And they want to see your kingdom come. They want to see your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And just want to pray one more time for our leaders, the volunteers of NextGen Ministry, that just not only love you, but they want to manifest that in their ministries that they're involved in both ICA Kids, ICA Youth, and the ICA Young Adults, God. We pray a blessing over them and their families, that they continue to grow in their faith, and that they want to bring people alongside to become more and more like you. Thank you guys so much for this opportunity. We thank you for our family and friends. Bless us. And we thank you for all the things you have in store for us. It is in Jesus' name that we humbly pray. Hallelujah. Amen. Amen.
Amen.
One more time, Assemble Online Camp. It is happening on October 1st and the 3rd. Sign up today before it ends on September 12th. God bless you.
Thank you, everyone, for meeting with us this week. We look forward to seeing you all next week. Bye.